I'm Tom, and this is a behind the scenes look at my entry to round 2 of 2012 ACBA World Championships. So I've had people asking me where I got all this stuff, or if I made it, or how much of it I made, so I thought I'd go over it now. First, a quick note about the lighting that I used in the video. I had one little lamp over on the right hand side, another lamp up here, and a little LED light shining up onto the glow to the force field that Magneto had. The LED light I made by pulling apart one of those little click lights, sticking it straight onto the battery so that it could be as small as possible, so it's easy to hide inside the scene. These guys here are pretty straightforward. They're the only figures that are literally just stood up, and as you could probably guess, that cutout's just held up on the back of her arm with a little bit of wax. I brought this jean grey specifically for this setup and this round. Again, Scott Summers also just stood up. To get Colossus suspended in mid-air, I built a little rig. As you can probably tell, he's being held up by the girders, the I-beams. Literally just stapled onto the back of this I-beam a little hook. The beams I made myself out of foam and painted them. They're just hot glued together. And this one was held on by a little piece of coat hanger on the inside to take the weight, with that little bit there just to give it a little extra stand so it didn't fall over. Positioning these guys on here was literally the last thing that I did, because they were the most pain in the arse ones to do. They were the ones that were most likely to fall off as I was doing it, so I left them till last because they were the least likely to stay up as well, but they seem to have managed to stay up there quite well. It's all held up by a single bit going into the peg hole at the back of Magneto there, and he's actually holding up Xavier with his hand, and Xavier is holding on to Magneto's cape there, so he really is holding him up in the air. Their feet don't touch, or at least they didn't when I set it up, the bottom. So that was the part that was going to fall apart a million times, so that's why I left that till last. Now that Magneto's out, you can see the hook a little bit clearer. Just a tiny bit of wire. This whole thing, as you can probably guess, is made out of wire and shitloads of hot glue. Now, for this cutout, I finally went with, "Hey, your precious X-Men can't even stop one old man." Alternatives that I were going to use were, "Eric, stop this foolishness," and then Magneto was going to be saying, "Nah, it's your mum who's being foolish," or something along those lines. Alternatively, simply Magneto saying, "Fuck you, Baldy!" As I was putting this thing together, I made sure to leave plenty of excess wire hanging out the back, because I knew I was going to need some way of attaching it. So I didn't bother to paint those bits because I knew they wouldn't be seen, but I just needed to make sure there was something hanging off the back and that there was enough wire inside to hang the figures on. But pretty pleased with how this thing turned out. Maybe I'll get to reuse it at some point. Maybe not. Maybe I'll give it away. Who knows? Nightcrawler here again is held on by a piece of wire. Now I know these figures are light and I could probably get away with using a piece of wax or something, but I much prefer using a mechanical fixing because it really pisses me off when you spend ages getting a figure just right and then the wax lets go. Favourite technique of mine of getting guys into really good positions is to put their feet on backwards. If their feet aren't going to be seen, sometimes the foot works better backwards for actually holding it in position. This foot was the other way round, so the real, like, you know, way round his foot should be. There's nothing to hold onto the wire and it just falls off. So as long as that foot's hidden, which I knew it was going to be because I was also hiding the wire, I figured I may as well put it on backwards and it holds up an awful lot better. That's all just hung up at the top. Get quite a few beams knocking about this place. That one is literally just balanced in there. This one is held onto the fence. A tiny little piece of wire, again stapled on. I mean, I didn't want to staple these to begin with, but as it went on and on, more things were falling over, and I thought, you know, fuck it, I've made these to be used in this setup, so if I need to staple things to them so that they stay up, give myself less of a headache doing stuff, that's better. I was just lent on there. This one's got blue tack underneath there, and a big chunk of wire just wedged in there. One of my favourite parts of the whole setup was getting Wolverine in position, because he should fall over just stood on one leg like that. And as you can see, he's not on a stand, but I've got a piece of wire in through there, and I've drilled a hole in the girder. You can still see the little crumbs where I've drilled the hole, and he's got that wire sort of wedged in there. That's just the right thickness to stay in his peg hole without damaging it. And so I could pose him in just the right position, and then when I got it right, just drop him in the hole. So that was probably the most satisfying bit of the whole setup, was just sliding him in there. Angel here is attached by a really big piece of wire that actually connects him up to the girder. It comes all the way across here. Now originally I had that piece of wire taped to his wings, but of course the tape wasn't strong enough and he kept falling off over and over and over again, and it got quite frustrating. So in the end I figured out how to do it again with a mechanical fixing. I've got a piece of wire going through his wings there. I'll show you. So here's the piece of wire attached to the girder. Nice thick piece, nice and solidly held in there, so I knew that wasn't going anywhere. And then here's the piece of wire in the back of his wings, attached by that point there and that point there, and it goes through that little hole in the middle of his wings, so you know it's definitely not going to fall off because it's going through that hole, and it's just wrapped around there once. And that's just ordinary sort of gardening wire, so it's not, you know, overly strong, but these figures are really light, so it doesn't have to be that strong. When positioning this guy and trying to get his pose sorted out, I just hooked him over the back of a wall for the most part, and then you could sort of get him in the right position. Once I was happy with how he was, hung him up on there. This is sort of the biggest piece that I made for this setup. It's made out of, I made all of these the same size, and this piece is made out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 small I-beams and 4 really long ones. Now I could have glued this whole thing together so that it was all just one solid piece, but I knew I was going to want to keep it and reuse it, so and this is where I snap it into 1,000 pieces and it's ruined forever. Hey, there you go. So I made it so it comes apart, so it's got little pegs in here, so you can slide in any one of these beams and build it up into a solid structure, so that basically so that they all stored flat, so that I can put them away and use them again if I wanted to. As for the rest of the backdrop, got this bit which I brought just off of Amazon, I think. My normal backdrops that you've seen in a lot of my videos, but with a different door just placed over the top of that one, just because I thought it looked better. Made this one double storied. I just had them knocking about. I don't have many of these left, so you know, if you do want to get your hands on one, you should probably contact me quite quickly before they all disappear. And a trusty old Ghostbusters building, which I've wanted to repaint for ages. That's always been sort of my plan, is I'm gonna paint the doors so they're not so stupidly plastic red, but never quite got around to it, so I use this nice boring side of it for now. So that just about wraps it up. If there's any parts of this setup that I missed that you're wondering, you know, how I did it, and you want to ask me, just leave a comment down below. Hopefully you enjoyed the explanation. If you did, let me know and I'll do more explanation videos showing how I put this stuff together. Happy posing.